Welcome back to the Growth Hack Franchise Marketing Unleashed. I'm Marcus, founder of AdCloud, where we help franchise brands grow smarter, not louder. Today's story might sound backwards, but stick with me. We slashed our ad budget in half and ended up with more bookings. You heard that right. No scaling, no new offers, just less spend and better traffic. And here's what we did. We paused all top of funnel prospecting for 30 days, no cold targeting, no broad interest. Instead, we focused only on Google Ads, Maps, and retargeting channels that hit warmer, high intent leads. The result? Bookings went up by 26%, lead volume dropped, but lead quality skyrocketed, and cost per booking went down and efficiency went way up. So do you really need more traffic or just better traffic? And that's the question we're here to answer. Let's break it all down. Mackenzie's here as always to ask the questions.
Okay, Marcus. So first off, why did you cut the budget? Was this intentional or was it reactive? Was this kind of a strategy play or did something force the budget cut?
When we kind of looked at it, a lot of the stuff that we do is focused on membership sales. And anytime we look at that, we look at quality of lead. What ultimately drives a new member sale? You can have 1,000 new leads and booked appointments in the door, but if none of them are buying a membership, you've got to try and solve a problem. And so we traditionally have pretty good membership conversion, though some of that is out of our control. But we wanted to see what would happen. We knew that Google was a better channel, but what would happen if we went away from broad cold targeting on social and started to solely focus primarily on Google networks and maps and getting into the 3-pack, doing those things just to see, could we drive enough traction there to help support the volume that social media typically drives, because we're now converting more members, which have a much higher lifetime value. And that was really what prompted that test of saying, hey, 30 days, like, can we completely rearrange the strategy that we've done, that most agencies do? And does it drive a better end user? Again, if you're a brand that's not selling memberships, it may not matter to you. But if you are in the membership world, it's something that you should kind of start to look at for sure.
So what exact channels got cut and which ones stayed live? Let's talk kind of specifics. Which ones did you sort of send to the trash and which ones kept running?
We didn't really cut any channels. We just repurposed them. We moved the budget, majority, about 80% of the budget, to Google, focused on Google search ads, map rank trackers, things in that nature. And then the 20% that was left, we stopped cold campaigns that were broad awareness, and we leveraged social media just to retarget Google traffic. In Google, it's all the low-hanging fruit, right? Everyone who is searching for something in relevance to your business or brand, not necessarily your brand itself, because those are already kind of one traffic. They already know about you, but people that might be searching for sauna services or whatever that may, whatever that product or similarity may be. And those are the ones that we want to capture. Now, does all Google traffic convert on first click? No. But that traffic that lands on your landing page or submits the lead form, now, instead of having this social campaign, Meta, Instagram, running to 75,000 people within a 10-mile radius that are seeing it, that have no intent or no interest in your product as of now, we started only showing ads to people who had clicked from a Google ad and didn't convert. And what that did is it allowed us to have a much smaller budget on social, but it was still being utilized in a full sense. But then Google was allowed to have a much larger budget, which allowed us to bid higher, to control more of the traffic search. And that is really where we started to see that turnaround. Everything in Google is like going to Vegas. It's bidding. You're bidding on keywords, phrases. And when you have a larger budget, you can now say, hey, we're willing to pay X amount for this specific key phrase or keyword. And if your competition isn't willing to pay that, you get to win majority of the impression share. So it's very analytical in that sense, and it takes that bigger budget to be able to do that. And then, of course, we get good conversion, usually in like the 70% range on Google, 70 to 75% range. But now we're taking all this warm traffic that abandoned, right? So let's just say, the 25% of the traffic that bounced and they didn't convert. Now they're seeing the ads on social media, and we're staying in front of them. But the one thing we know about that audience is this is 25% of people that are actually interested in the product that we deliver. And it becomes so much more effective. Now, this isn't to say that broad targeting is not a thing that you shouldn't do it. I think there's room for that, but I think you should start with Google traffic and retargeting. Let that be your driving force, and then have the broad awareness campaigns come in at a later time where then you can start to filter out and sift through. I think too many times we divide up the budget immediately in the middle and say, okay, we're going to try to just drive it from both ends rather than honing in on one primary platform and really figuring out that funnel and then sprinkling in the little extras here and there. Social is a lot easier to launch, so most people tend to go there first and leverage that. But then they also complain when they're like, well, all these leads suck. They're not converting. They wonder why, but it's also cheaper, right? So like we have to get out of the mindset of like, this is the cheaper platform with the more volume, so I'm going to go there, but then I'm going to complain later because I think the leads are not any good, when you could have spent a little bit more to go market on Google and had probably a better, or historically from what we see, better quality lead, more likely to convert to a long-term member or client, whatever that lifetime value is for you and your business. And that is far more valuable. Every day I would spend $10 to $20 more on that lead. That's going to bring in thousands of dollars over the lifetime that they come into the business than to save $10 or $20 and go market on Meta or Instagram. Again, if your business model fits into that mold.
So, on that same subject, what did you learn about the traffic quality versus quantity? Is this a less is more situation? What kind of surprised you the most there?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Less can be more. One of the things that we always tell clients since kind of learning some of that is like Google will never drive the volume. And when I say volume, I mean like number of leads, number of conversions that social can do, right? It'll never drive in actual individuals because Google has a ceiling height and there's competition. And so you have to play into the fact and say, okay, if we can drive $15,000 of revenue from Google and spend $1,500 a month, that's a win. But when we reach that ceiling height, we have to leverage social media. But starting out and saying, okay, yes, less is more in the long-term marathon of a business. So many people run a business like it's a sprint. They don't think 6, 12, 24 months down the road. They want the immediate 30-day like satisfaction of growth and like excellence in this unicorn, and I think it's because we all read like these unicorn stories. This brand went from 0 to 50 million in 30 days. And are there brands that do that? Absolutely. It's great. It's fantastic, but it's like 0.0001% of the industry. And so that is where like, I think business owners have to shift the mindset and think of it as a marathon. This is not, how do we necessarily get to this point tomorrow, but how do we get there and sustain, keyword sustain, throughout the next year to 2 years to 5 years to 10 years, and how do we continue to grow that? And you have to start to look at longevity of clients, because if you just have a churn wheel of people coming in and coming out, you're going to be fighting every month to pay the bills, to pay your staff, to pay yourself. You have to try to say, okay, how do I get people in that want to be here, that want to stay? And there's no perfect science to it because we can't go in and reconfigure all of these consumers' brains. Some of them will just be jerks. They'll no show, right? Like that's just human nature. You're going to run into that. But I think we try to figure out if Google, the intent is the primary channel, we need to make sure that we give it everything we have before we go to this colder channel that's going to bring in this mix. Now, it's a big training mindset shift because business owners for the last 30 years have been told volume, 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 volume of leads. Every call I get on, the first thing that's ever mentioned from an owner is like, can you get me 100 leads a month? It's the only number they compute. Can you get me 100 leads a month? Can you give me 200? Can you get 500? it never starts with like, how do we get a client in the door that's going to come back? That should be the pinnacle of the conversation, not can you get me 100 leads? Because I can get you 100 bad leads, but what if I get you 30 or 40 really great leads that are willing to spend 10x the amount of the offset 70 bad leads that are going to come in and just waste time? And so that is where the conversation is starting to shift. And I think if you look at historically, even in the franchising world, our franchise brands that perform the best, have the best AUV, like are doing really, really well, are playing a marathon. Like they're running a marathon. They're looking at long term. They're not as concerned about volume of leads. They're more concerned about the quality to make sure that their staff is spending time on people that actually want to continue using services, buy a membership. Those are the pieces where I think become really, really important. Unfortunately, that's about 10% of the market that think that way. The other 90% have been sold this dream and idea that you have to have 10 million leads so that you can convert 1%. And that's just not the best strategy unless you're in the business of churn and burn. And if that's what you want to do and you want to scrape by every month, more power to you. But I think starting to transition and change. And then I think some of that is just because there's a lot of owners who have a fear of Google. I think Google scares a lot of people. I think it's very intricate and how you have to go into it. And that's where I say Google is not a DIY. Now, I know everyone's going to think, well, it does have DIY options, where you can just click a button and they say that they will format your search terms and et cetera. You can do that and throw away money. Our staff, they are focused on this day in and day out, hour after hour, watching trends, moving budgets based on what is pinging and what's converting. If you're not doing that, you're never going to beat it at scale because your competitor likely is doing that and you'll never be able to beat that. And so I think there's just a natural fear of leveraging that platform the best. And there's so many ways to do that across the board, but I think we have to become more comfortable with less volume, higher conversions, more worth.
So if someone is listening right now and does want better leads and say they are trying to DIY it, but with less spend than they are currently doing, where should they start?
If you're in a place where you only have the budget to DIY, go out there and buy like a $200 course, right? And learn Google as much as you can. You're not going to become an expert overnight. Maybe you can become dangerous enough to at least get something launched and drive some results that can hopefully bring in enough revenue so that you can pay an expert to come in and rebuild that and do it right. That's what I would do if I was in that position of like, hey, I don't really have the budget for an agency or an individual freelancer, but I need to kind of scrape by and get this done. But switch to Google, especially if you're pushing social and you're not getting much return, or there's like a negative return on your investment there. Switch to Google and test it. Don't just keep blindly running social ads, hoping that one day the sky's going to open and you're going to find some magical conversion, because we see that a lot where like they'll just evergreen run ads with nothing converting or like a negative return. And it's like, what's the point? Just either pause it and don't do anything, or go and try a new platform. I highly suggest if you are not leveraging Google to date, that should be your go-to because the intent is there. Why would you not want to be in front of the people actively looking for it versus going and trying to educate and get people to be interested in it? Tackle Google first, transition your budget, move over there, make sure you're tracking as well. And again, you need to have the tracking in place because especially if you're DIY, you need to know pretty quickly if it's working or not. And if it's not, it's likely because of the setting you have. I would say today, it's pretty rare that we see a Google ads campaign not convert something. We've done a podcast episode on the Bounce House inflatable business that we launched, and Google was our primary source. To be honest, 10% of our ad budget was on social. As beautiful as these creatives were, we would spend $2,000 to $3,000 a month on Google, which would net $20,000 in bookings. Leverage that platform first, max it out, and then move into social. But then we would use social just for awareness and retargeting. It's tested and tried. Max out Google and then go to social, even though Google's a little harder to learn and get launched. And find someone to talk about your strategy, because ultimately we're talking about those people coming in. But if you have a bad follow-up, it may not matter either. There's a lot of things in play. Like, that's great traffic, but it still needs to be easy for them to book an appointment or get into your lead funnel, et cetera. So there's no silver bullet in saying, hey, if you launch Google, it's going to convert automatically. Now you're closer to the end goal, but if your website is terrible or your funnel is bad or you don't have an easy, low barrier booking flow, then you may run into issues, because that traffic is actively looking, which means if yours isn't easy enough, they're going to find another competitor who is showing that ad too. So you have to make sure that everything is buttoned up really nice. And if you don't know what to look at or where to, how to figure that out, reach out to us, reach out to an expert that you know, and just ask the questions. Listen, for us, like, we'll answer. You don't have to sign an agreement with AdCloud. We'll answer in the sense of, here's where we think the gaps are, and then you can do with that what you will. And maybe that's working with AdCloud, or maybe that's taking that advice and building out your own flow. Here's the truth. You don't always need more budget to get more results. You just need better traffic. Google Ads, Maps, and retargeting worked because the leads already knew who we were and the product that we were delivering. They were looking for us or something similar to us. And instead of shouting louder at the cold crowd, we whispered to the warm ones, and they booked. So before you throw more money at prospecting, ask yourself, are you even maximizing the leads who already know your name or are looking for your product or service? Thanks for tuning in to the Growth Hack Franchise Marketing Unleashed. If you found this helpful, follow the show, leave a review, and send this to someone who's addicted to scaling but allergic to a really good strategy. We'll catch you next week with more data, more insights, and fewer buzzwords.